Right. Exactly. It's like it's like playing telephone, right?
Yeah,
I
exactly.
told Mom I wanted chocolate from the store, but Mom bought me not chocolate.
She brought home grapes because Dad switched it on me because he's an asshole.
I love grapes and chocolate, so I'm okay with either. Yeah, it's interesting too. I know that one of the things too, right, that we probably hear a lot about nowadays in terms of information from all over is smartphone addiction, right? I mean, I've heard everything from if you sleep with your phone next to your head, you will get like brain cancer within 2 years, to, oh no, it's totally fine. Like, do whatever you want with your smartphone. And where's the truth, right? It's hard to determine, I think, in some respects, because we don't know long term, right? It's hard to figure out what will happen long term because smartphones are relatively recent in the span of a person's lifetime, but now that we are able to see children that have used smartphones for a while, or technology, or some of this mobile technology for a long time, it does give us the ability to actually do a little bit of research and get some more insight as best as we can. And there's actually a new study from Seoul's Korea University. It was presented just in 2017, just last year, at the English. Help me out here. Radiological Society of North America. There we go. Thank you. And they found that addiction to technology, like smartphones, can actually cause a chemical imbalance in the brain. And this addiction actually increases GABA levels and disrupts that balance between the GABA levels and glutamate in the brain. And too much GABA has actually been linked to side effects like drowsiness and anxiety. And these students that had this smartphone addiction scored higher on tests that tracked depression and anxiety, insomnia, impulsivity, all of that. And now in the study, they used magnetic resonance spectroscopy to investigate the chemical composition of these teenagers who were diagnosed as having an addiction to smartphones or the internet. And so now the good news is that they had also behavioral therapy done on a subset of those in the study, and it did help in lowering those side effects. So while this addiction can cause chemical imbalance, it's not irreversible, and you can help to mitigate it. But again, if you think about this long term, where it's unclear, right? Like, we don't know what this is going to do long term if we don't become aware that we're addicted to these things, right? Because the earlier that you alter your brain chemistry, right, the worse that the impacts can be long term. And depression, anxiety, insomnia, I mean, these are things that me personally, I'm not sure 200-300 years ago, how prevalent were they? Did people even really understand the concept? Was anybody recording it, putting it down in reports? Unclear. But I do know that, we certainly hear about it now more than ever. So it could be due to the fact that we're able to recognize it more. But it could also be due to the fact that we are introducing things in our lives that cause it more as well, right?
Well, and also, too, to go off this research saying that, again, this addiction can lead to the side effects of, for instance, anxiety, depression, drowsiness, insomnia, which, again, they all within themselves can be interlinked as well and can help fuel the other. But also the Pew Research Center published stats that 46% of Americans claim they could not live without their phone. So if you think about that, Out of all the things you could say you cannot live without, their number one choice was a phone. I mean, if that doesn't shout the type of addiction we have, at least in the US, I don't know what does. Because that right there says that, okay, I don't care about food, I don't care about water, I don't care about personal relationships, I must have my phone here. And, you know, it's no wonder also that we are facing, at least in my mind, that we're facing anxiety and depression and so forth from these technological advances, because overall, I don't think it's just the phone itself, of course. You know, I think it's other factors within technology, like social media and comparing yourself to others rather than to your former self, and seeing how you've improved personally, but trying to relate to others and going, I'm not like this, so therefore I must be failing. Or the other factor that, well, we have all these notifications on our phones now, and we have all these apps that we have to update or keep up to date with, and therefore we have now more to do, and it's so readily available that we automatically feel like we need to instantly react to everything rather than giving it time and say, you know what, someone texted me or someone sent me a Snapchat or Instagram let me know someone liked a picture I posted, that can wait. Because it's all instant gratification and it's all right there. And again, we are very addictive. Even if you might say naturally, oh, I don't have a very addictive personality, still so many people get proven wrong because they find that they have that addiction to this technology into instant gratification of having information right at their fingertips and being able to search right away for it. Because I can't tell you how many people I've come across where they've asked me a question that, oh, I don't know, maybe we should look it up. And they don't have their phone, like, oh, shoot, I'd look it up on my phone, but I can't do it. Oh, I don't know what else to do. I don't know, grab a book. Or I don't know, wait. Like, do you really need to know about it right now? Then we'll remember it. Take a note. You know, write down a note. We'll get to it later. But it really gets to people. So I think there are so many factors, not just directly from technology like this is saying, but also kind of side effects of having technology introduced into our lives as well. So I feel like there's so many factors here that again, technology brings some amazing benefits, but there are a lot of detriments if we're not careful and mindful of what it can do.
Yeah, and I want to touch on two really great things that you pointed out. One is, right, it's not that the addiction to the tool itself, you know, like the phone itself isn't, you know, sending horrible waves in our brains and killing us in our sleep, right? It's what we do with that tool. Like, you know, if you have a hammer, you can use it to build a house, roughly speaking, or you can use it to destroy something, right? Or a person. Like, you can use it as a weapon, right? But the tool itself, it's only how you use it that really impacts the results of how it affects you, right? Mm-hmm. So the phone itself, you know, the internet, all of that, it's a tool. And the other thing I wanted to bring up that kind of ties in with us too, that you pointed out is, and actually somebody in our chat, Teddy, also mentioned that, you know, our society is changing into a technical one, right? And we assume that the human body is going to adapt and sort of mutate and change to it, right? But at the rate at which this technology is changing is much faster than our own bodies can adapt to, right? And so that's when we have issues like, you know, like this addiction is literally changing our brain chemistry, but it's not, you know, the rest of our bodies haven't really quite caught up to try to help mitigate it, right? It's sort of like, well, we can go out into the sun, but if you don't have sunscreen on, you're probably going to burn unless your body has already adapted to it, or you are born and able to have, you know, more melanin in your skin to help absorb some of it. And then the other thing that you brought up that I thought it was really great, because when I was a little younger, I was talking to someone who, you know, mentioned that he no longer had to remember things. All he had to remember was where to look for that information. So it's sort of like saying, I don't need to go read the books in the library to be informed. I just need to know where I can find a library. to get that information. And that's sort of this, this whole concept of, Googling, right?
Right.
Or oh man, I don't know what the answer is, but right, you immediately go for your phone, or you immediately go for your search bar, instead of potentially stopping and thinking about it, seeking out a person to answer your question, finding another method of trying to figure out what the answer is. And again, it does depend on what the question is, what you're searching for.
Right.
But at the same time, I think, certainly my first go-to is always Google it up. And Wikipedia is like my choice of websites to go to. And that right there has already changed the way that a lot of us, I think, especially in the US, like search for information. But also because we're now just searching for information, I feel like sometimes we don't even stop to absorb that information, right? It's like we found it, we read it, we're done, right? But then if you get asked again, it sort of rewires the way your brain thinks, because at that point, I don't need to remember my friend's phone number. I just need to know that it's in my phone in the phone book, right? I used to know everybody's phone numbers when I was younger. I knew their landlines, their this, their that. I knew all of their different email addresses. Now, I barely remember my own, right? And that's just because I have to give it out to people sometimes. So that's rewiring our brain in a way that is, you don't even have to measure that, with scientific methods or anything. Like, it's happening already, and it's been happening. And that's, I don't know, that's, again, it's change, right? Just like with anything else. Mm-hmm. It's not bad or good. It just is. But taken to one or the other extreme, it could be bad, right? Like if our kids are growing up in a society where you're so wrapped up in yourself, in a bizarre way, because it's like you're there looking at your phone, surrounded by your quote friends unquote, all looking at the same thing. So it's like you're sharing that experience, but you're not, because you're not really there. You're not present, right? You're not present. And yeah, what is that doing to relationships, and what is that doing to human interaction? But also, more importantly, is like what is it doing to that person, right? Like when your self-worth, like you were mentioning, is, oh well, who liked my picture and who did this and that? Like I have the same thing. Like I'll be looking at, a sunset or a really nice meal, and I instantly get the urge to like take a picture, put a filter on it, get some hashtags, and shout it out to the world, right? Instead of literally being in the moment, enjoying my damn meal in peace.
Well, I think the concept of the addiction and everything else and the over-reliance on technology, it all varies based on what we're doing on said technological piece, right? So for instance, many people, if they're posting on Instagram, is because, either they're trying to get attention, or they just want to share with friends something. But, there are many people that just want to show maybe a life that they don't have, but they're trying to showcase it for attention purposes or what have you, or whatever. But they're doing some kind of really true action to get a reaction. But there are many people too that will just literally go through those images on Instagram, and they're not being active, they're being passive in a way, in the sense of they're not taking action by posting up their own content, but they're engaging in others. And I think for those people, it's a sense of escape because of everything around them, because there are more people on this planet now than there was 100 years ago. There are more things flashing in our face, trying to get our attention, especially as we are in a very consumer-based world now. No matter the country. I mean, U.S. is definitely known for its capitalism and consumerism, but other countries are following suit too. And so there's more marketing and more things being bombarded at us to garner our attention, that sometimes people use that as an escape to actually kind of semi-shut their brain down and almost go into a meditative state. This is also the reason why many people will play games, because they can close out the rest of the world for a little bit and give their brain a break because they feel overstimulated. Also, some people use this with music. So in some respects, it's not just technology overall, it's just the fact that we as human beings are also not giving ourselves enough opportunities to take breaks and to separate ourselves from all the noise. And so we then try to adhere to something specific, and it becomes an addiction.
So you have to use some of your inside to make yourself feel better, and you need to learn how to do that. That being said, I also believe that the outside can very absolutely influence how we feel on the inside, and that it's important to place oneself in an environment and expose yourself to the outside that does make you feel better, right? Or makes you feel the way that you want to feel, and realize when it is the outside, when it is an outside that doesn't work anymore, and remove yourself from that outside, or go to the inside, then switch on over and use that instead, right? Because, you know, there's plenty of things that I love being around, but when they're not there, I can't count, right? There's nothing for me to get from the outside to help me feel that way. So I have to be able to go on the inside and do that for myself, and recognize when to make the switch, or they can both kind of be happening at the same time, if that makes sense, right? But and so they seem contradictory, I think, but it's all about, again, listening to yourself and realizing, when it is appropriate to allow the outside to influence you, and when it is appropriate to not allow the outside to influence you. If that answers that question.
Well, I think from my perspective, and I'm sure this definitely ties in with what you're saying, is, to go off of, we were talking about the Olympics for the first examples, for the first story. So my example here is that the external environment can light the torch, but it's up to your internal environment to carry the torch to the next point.
Ooh.
So basically, an external factor can help light a fire, or can help create something, a certain feeling inside of you, a certain spark. But it's up to you to do something with it, and it's up to you to carry it on. I can go to a great TEDx speech and feel empowered to start a business, or to change certain things in my environment, or like my diet or something like that. But unless I actually plan things out, put in the work, and basically internally start preparing myself for that journey, it's not going to happen. And so it's going to end up fizzling out. And I personally believe, and again, I'm not saying this is scientific fact, but I personally believe that if we're over reliant on these external things inspiring us, and just assume it's going to do all the work for us, we're going to start getting desensitized to those factors. And what's going to end up happening is then we have to find a new source to create that spark again. And we become like drug addicts, right? And just like with drugs, for instance, someone can start with a less harsh drug and suddenly they're on meth. You know what I mean? Because they're just not getting that same feeling. So they keep working their way up the hierarchy. And I feel it's like the same way with our external, on how we feel psychologically and physically, right? We all want to be comfortable in a sense. We all want to feel like we're in a space that's warm and welcoming, rather than like super sterile. Well, I guess it depends on the person. But we might do something with the paint colors on the walls. We might do something with the lighting. But overall, though, unless you really change something about how you're feeling internally too, and run with that energy that the external is giving you, it's going to be all for naught. And then you're going to go, oh, well, this isn't doing what I want. So now, okay, well, maybe I should move. Maybe I should then try another place, or maybe I should try to implement this other thing. So, I think the external can only give you so much. I'll give you another example here too that's really personal to me, but I think it's very beneficial for people out in chat and who are listening on the podcast to kind of understand this way of thinking. So about when I was, I would say about 17 years old, so many moons ago, back in the day, I'm not that terribly old, but still back in the day, actually I had one of my parents, my mother, who passed away. And I had put a lot of emphasis on external things once she passed away. So a lot of things of hers, it reminded me of her again. And so I tried to cling on to those things because I felt that sort of feeling again of what it was like to have her around, or I would, remember certain things that had happened that we had done together. But then, after a while, I wasn't quite getting the same feeling because I was over reliant on those external influences. And there was also the fact that, if something happened to it, I would lose something or something would get damaged. I would get so angry because I was so reliant on that one thing, that tangible item that wasn't the person it was representing, to give me that feeling once again. And at least in my mind, I felt like I had to come to terms with the fact that this person is no longer here in my life, and that it's really important to remember what you want to remember, and pull away the feelings that you want to pull away without relying on those things to try to re-spark them, because those things aren't going to bring that person back. And I'm not bashing on people who still hold on to mementos. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but for me, at where I was at mentally and everything else with what was going on, it was important not to be addicted to that, because I started becoming addicted to it, because I was like, oh, this is going to help me just like any other substance would to make me feel better about the situation. And so it was just really important. I had to separate myself and go, things don't make the person makes the person. And that's both for the person that thing was supposed to represent, but also for me as an individual. I had to move on past that point. I couldn't keep myself back in the past. There's no growth there in the past. The past is done. The past is, in a way, to, pardon the pun here, but is dead. It is gone. It is not there anymore. And it really is important for us to live in the here and now, and to be able to move forward and not even, we can get caught up too in the future, right? We can get really caught up in this is where I want to be, or these are the things where I'm supposed to be at with my life. So we focus so much on the end point and not enough on the steps it takes to get to the end point. So we lose that whole enjoyment of the journey. So you can either be stuck in the past or you can be stuck in the future. And we always use these things to try to supposedly make us feel good. But again, that can only do so much. And so we can easily get addicted to this, or to technology, or to really anything. But it's important for us to understand when enough is enough, and at least try to make corrective steps. Even if it doesn't work out and we have to then change paths and try something new, that doesn't mean you failed. That means you're attempting, and that's so much better for you than not doing anything at all.
Well, the mind is a powerful tool, right? And I don't know who said this, so I'm not going to misattribute it, but somebody, said that if we do live in our minds in the past too much, that can, that's sort of depression, that can lead to depression, or that is sort of kind of what depression comes from in some instances. And when we live too much in our minds in the future, that can cause anxiety, and that's kind of where anxiety can come from as well. And that's why I definitely believe that it's very important to try as best as we can to stay to the present, and it's not to say you can't think about the past or think about the future, but to live in the present, to live in the here and now, because the past stuff happened. Learn from it if you can. Have a good story if you can, part 2. But don't let that necessarily define who you are now and right here,
right,
or determine where you can go into the future. And then definitely think about the future. You need to have goals. You have to have things that you're looking forward to, right? But at the same time, you can't live too much in that and worry too much about that and miss being here in the now. Too much staring at your phone, y'all. I see all these younger people who are literally walking side by side down the street, and they are all just looking at their cell phones, and it blows my mind. I'm like, be in the here and now, guys. Be in the here and now, because what's on your phone? The past.
Oh yeah, well, and this isn't to say that you should not feel what we consider negative emotions, right? That we're not supposed to feel sadness. Right. Or a bit of depression or anything like that. We're not saying you're not supposed to feel that and that you should block that all away and you should always feel great, because sometimes you just don't. That's the body's process of going through things, both mentally and physically. And plus, it's important to feel emotional pain in a way. It really is, because it helps you to move on. It helps you to grow as a person. And I'm just saying this personally as someone who has gone through that process many occasions, where if it wasn't for me experiencing those, sitting in the here and now feeling it and forcing myself in some respects to feel it rather than try to take this kind of escapism route, I would not have gotten to the point where I have, where I feel mentally and physically, and I would not have become the person I am. And, you know, again, there's some days where you're happy about the person you are, and there are other days where you just hate the person you are. And that's part of the process too, right? But it's important for us to understand, okay, why do I feel this way? And question yourself. It's not crazy to do this. It's actually very healthy to do this. So that way you can learn to let go and move forward. And Beard Pwn actually brings up a great book by Eckhart Tolle, which I've read and highly recommend, which is The Power of Now, which covers a lot of this. And I would also say another really good book is Force versus Power. I believe I got that title correct, or Power versus Force. But that's also another great book about talking about using the power of oneself versus forcing yourself into or onto something. It's about, again, learning from something and becoming confident and comfortable in it rather than forcing something onto something else. So it's a great book. And again, that's kind of a weird random summary based on the time we have today. I don't want to get too much into it. And then, there's also another book, actually, real quick, is You Are Not Your Brain. It's a scary one, as Beard Pwn puts up. But that, again, I have not read that one. But again, if that's something that interests you and you really enjoy this topic, again, please feel free to check those books out.
And there's some great questions being brought up in chat too. And just to kind of summarize, I think a little bit of what Lieutenant Exotics is saying, the important thing is to just feel the now. And there's the semicolon to that, which is something that we've talked about in our past show, in one of our past episodes. It's also important to kind of create the mindset that you hopefully is a positive mindset, but that you can create your own mindset, right? It's how you experience the now, how you've experienced the past, how you want to, you've got the power to choose how you want to experience that and how you want to create that, I guess, truth for yourself. And I'm aware that, there's obviously, there are some, and I'm blanking on the word, but there are some situations, whether it's due to your own brain chemistry, your genetics, your past, that has potentially impacted in your ability to choose that for yourself, which is why I always say, it's kind of, I would always recommend, to try to do your best to create your truth for yourself in that way. Because I realize that sometimes it is harder than others, and that's even if you let's say are 100% healthy in all sorts of manner, you can still be having a bad day. Like you wake up and you just, as they say, on the wrong side of the bed, right? And everything is just like not working for you that day, or the opposite, everything is working for you that day, right? But to part of the creating your mindset is to yes, feel all the emotions, feel the present, be in the present and now, but also if you want to change something about that particular experience going forward, is to also detach yourself a little bit from the emotion, look at what the situation happened objectively as you can, and put steps in place to make the change that you want to happen. So it's right. We're not saying, you can only feel happy all the time. I personally, I do buy them, but those little posters and stuff that's like, be happy and be positive, and it's like, I just like to surround myself with those things. But at the same time, it's like, I don't look at them as, I have to be happy and I have to do this and that. It's just, to me, they're a reminder of, that's right, I can choose certain things. I can choose which emotions I want to hold on to and experience again. I can choose what emotions I don't want to feel again, and try to, change the outward, or put myself in an environment where that works, or look to myself internally to help change that as well.
Well, and even if it's not the the action of instantly changing an emotion, but
Right.
it's really more so like working toward that as a goal then. Like, okay, my day today, well, I woke up and I didn't feel so great, and I'm having a rough time, but you know what? I do want to feel better because I know there are things to get done today, and there are things that I definitely want to achieve because those are things I'm passionate about. And so this is the type of mindset that I am working toward then in order to make sure that I have the day that I think best works for me, right? And that's really all you can do. It's not that you can just instantly change your brain and all of a sudden, ooh, I feel great now. If that was the case, sell me the Switch. Where is it? No. But really, it is about that, at least picking that journey and saying, okay, these are the emotions that I'm wanting to feel today, or the type of mood I want to be in. It's just like when someone creates a business or a piece of art, they're also thinking about like, well, what do I want the audience to leave today thinking after they've watched this or experienced this? And I think we have to do that for ourselves too. We are our own audience. And so we have to think about, well, what do we want to experience today, and what can we do to achieve steps toward that then? I think that's really the big key here, is to not deny your emotions, is to recognize your emotions, recognize any addictions you may have that you're facing, and look at it and go, okay, how can I work against this, or how can I work towards this, or what should I be working toward, really, I think is the best way to word that.
Right. It's like going to the gym, right? You got to work the muscle. You got to work the mindset muscle. And some days are great and some days are not great and some days are mediocre. And I mean, we have like decades of life on this planet, hopefully. Nobody has to do this in one day. Nobody has to do this in a year. Nobody has to do this in 2 years. But it's really, I guess to me, it's understanding, or I would love if more people understood this. It's that there is a lot that you can control. And maybe it isn't necessarily control over your environment, but you do have control over how you react to that environment, at the very least. In most circumstances. I feel like I have to add all these disclaimers before everyone comes out at me, but and it's not necessarily easy, especially if you're not used to that, if you're not used to believing in that. There's definitely lots of things that I think that I've been lucky to learn now that I wish I did know 20 years ago. But again, I don't want to live in that past, and it's like, all right, well, moving forward, I will try to be better at this, or I will try to be better at the version that I want to be better at. Because again, if you want to feel not peppy or happy all the time, that's fine too. You can feel however you want to feel. Just make sure that you create that for yourself at that point. Mm-hmm. And hopefully you're not hurting yourself or anybody else in the process. But, it's okay to also just want to feel calm. I know there's some people who are like, I want to feel euphoric high all the time. I'm like, I don't. That sounds a little exhausting, actually, to be honest. I'm okay with having those moments. And then, as Evin mentioned, the negative emotions actually help in giving us a contrast. It's sort of like how snow makes us appreciate the nice warm weather, and nice warm weather can sometimes make us appreciate snow and coldness. I mean, I know some people on Twitch that I've met who are sick of the heat. They want to go somewhere cold. Right. So, there is no one kind of truth for everyone in terms of what completes their soul on the inside, but I do think that the one truth that I would say is, for the most part, we do have control of our minds and what we choose to experience and how we choose to interpret it. It might not be easy, but it's there.
Yeah, and I know we have to get to our last story here, but the one thing I do want to point out is, you mentioned too, like putting out these disclaimers that, again, not everyone can, or some people have it harder than others, right? If you have depression, anxiety, PTSD, which are 3 things I have actually been diagnosed with, I completely get what you're saying too, and I do not take offense of what you're saying, because I think it makes sense without the disclaimer, right? Like, because how I look at it is that if you do suffer from these types of mental obstacles, as I do look at them just as that, as obstacles. And that, you know, sometimes you can have mood swings and one little thing pisses you off right off the bat. And it's almost hard to almost damn near impossible at times when you get into this kind of fight or flight syndrome, where it's damn near impossible almost to not instantly react to something and take it from, you know, a 20% to 100%. You know, it can be very, very difficult not to have that just instant jump when you have things like that. But at the same time then, because again, you can't just then sit there with those instant jumps and go, okay, I'm feeling upset, I'm feeling stressed, everything is okay. No, you basically go from like, hey, this is great, motherfucker, what'd you say? And that's kind of like how it happens, right? Maybe not that extreme, but it can happen like that, right? And so I think what's important is for folks, if you have any one of these obstacles, is to at least catch yourself in that action as you're doing it, recognize it then, and once you feel calmed down enough, is to sit down and think about that, and then have this moment of realization and acceptance and goal setting. But give yourself time, don't force it, and don't go, well, the person next to me, I could see them getting mad, but they were so controlled about it and they calmed themselves down and worked through it. Why can't I do that? Don't beat yourself up over that. Again, give yourself a break and give yourself some time, because you're facing something that isn't like them. Again, as we've mentioned before, don't compare yourself to someone else. Compare yourself to your previous self. So if you've reacted strongly in the past, okay, then you know that you're going to react strongly in the present and then potentially in the future. So just know and accept that, and you'll actually potentially become less angry, less stressed out, because you know that this is the type of cycle you can kind of fall into. And then you can slowly accept it and work through it. It just might be slower, it might be harder, but that doesn't mean that you can't do the same process. Again, there's just these additional steps.